Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode. The title is Efficiency of the Gods. And so I thought there was no more fitting picture than a cat kind of being thrown. I was thinking about this idea of the concept of beauty and what beauty really means to the human being. And the human being can experience beautiful moments or it can look at beautiful things. And I was thinking, what is so beautiful about, for example, the sunset? And I realized that there's a dimension to beauty where it is new to the person. That means anything I've seen that I've suddenly felt it was beautiful, whether I'd seen that thing before or seen that person before, it was as if like it was a new moment. It was suddenly as if the light in the clouds shines and you see something new. So the spotlight that receives beauty is also receiving that beauty as a novelty to any sort of thought the person has had before. For example, when Terence McKenna, the scholar, he said in one of his talks that there's another tenant in the room. He was speaking about human intelligence and how there's something else going on here more than just the human frameworks of our acknowledgement of our world. There's more. And so when he said there's another tenant in the room, me personally, as someone who's kind of been feeling there's more than our eyes here in this world, it was beautiful. It was beautiful because it allowed a new inner realm to project. And I think external beauty is when that external beauty echoes and translates internally. So when I say efficiency of the gods, you see, guys, in the 6th century, human beings, or you can say religion was one of the first attempts to give the unknown a personality. That means people looked at themselves and they were like, I'm a person, yeah. And it's like, I didn't create myself, I was created. So people had ascribed in some sense a personalized universe. You can say religion is your personal universe. I can say that to some degree, that we looked at ourselves and we saw what we were and we were a person and we saw meaning in that. And then certain people back in the day looked at the sky and the clouds and they're like, wait a minute. And people, in some sense, in many traditions, you see something that the language kind of did was that it humanized unknown intelligence for the mind of man. That means you can say a human being might get scared if an extraterrestrial appears out of nowhere and speaks to them. But the human being may not get scared if a human being speaks to them. Do you know? So what I mean is, it's like the introduction of the new and the overwhelming through a lens of familiarity, and that becomes beautiful. That means it's like it can't be completely foreign, the event. It has to evoke something in the inner realms. What do I mean by evoke, guys? I mean, like right now when I look at this coffee cup, the concept coffee cup is instantaneously evoked as my attention in the moment goes on to this object. So if you notice any object you look at, the subject tends to pop into your mind. Now, when you become aware of thoughts, you also begin looking at the concept. So it's like, imagine me looking at this coffee cup right now, right? I'm not this coffee cup. Now imagine me looking at the idea when I look at this coffee cup, the idea that projects in my mind, imagine me looking at that thought. And that's when a thought cannot look at a thought, and that's when language breaks as belief. That means you can just kind of see it. Language is the imposition. It's not an imposition in the sense that we need to get rid of the blockade. It's more in the sense that language is like an Iron Man suit, and we think we are that suit. You know? And on some level, for individual survival reasons, like if you want to exist and continue and survive as an individual, you do require names and personality. I mean, I'm not, in no way I'm telling people not to be a person. You know, whether you like it or not, you are. You know? But the thing is, the individualness of it, that means it's like we're like now that coffee cup, but when we look at ourselves in the mirror, the idea, our name, our story pops into our head. Right? But now, when you become the observer of the phenomenology, you in some sense are not defined by the movement of the phenomenology. That means it's like, here's a great metaphor. They told me this in India. I was there for a few months, and this man by the name of Vijay, not Vijay Nand, we called him Guruji. And till the end of it, I never realized what his name was. People called him Guruji. In India, if you go, you'll notice that in their manner of speech, underneath, like behind people's names, there's J.I. J.I. is a kind of more down-to-earth way of acknowledging. So there was someone who, his name was Mahatma Vijay Nand, but we called him Uncle G, for example. You know, and when I say Uncle G, I don't mean it like a rapper, like Uncle space G. Straight up G from the underground. No, I mean J.I., like Uncle G or something, Guru G, something like that. But anyways, this man said that just take this into consideration. A person on the highway, imagine you're caught in traffic and you're like, what the fuck? You don't like the traffic, you know? You see the person caught in the traffic, he's suffering, he's upset. But if a yogi from a mountain cliff was seeing that guy in traffic, the yogi is not disturbed by the traffic. So you suffer where your attention is. And that is the greatest clue that man's suffering is to some degree self-imposed. Because you have a free will to move, there will be the victim mentality if an effort doesn't arise from your inner realms to change things. So what that means is speech is an inner effort, guys. Speech is, believe it or not, it's kind of divine. When people speak, it's like the intention of the inner realms to externalize. It's not often. Even though most people speak, but not a lot of people speak consciously. That means some people speak for emotional reasons. And what does that mean? That means they don't care about the concept, they just want to release something. You know, they just want to release their inner realms and the outer realms, and they don't want to be responsible for it, or they don't care to even look at it. You know, that means that you don't know how many people on this earth I've talked to, and I've been having a serious conversation, but then it took me like a minute and I realized this person doesn't have a serious attention. What am I doing, you know, trying to share something that there are no ears for? But then comes the challenge of life, that the microphone is in your hand only once every day. And so this is life, the world that happens behind our eyes and the world that happens in front of it, and the symbiosis of the inner events with the outer events, the inner life with the outer life, into the full recognition that the presence is there before the personality told its story or began running. By the way, guys, a quick announcement. This morning I kind of, you know, activated some of some of my writings can be found on Amazon. You just have to search my name, not like Mr. Within, my actual name. I'll put it here. And I'll recommend anybody who sees the books I've kind of written. The Great Work, there is a talk I've given on it. So before buying that book, whoever wants, whose attention goes to that, go listen to the talk I gave on it. So search The Great Work book review. And it's in Kindle format so people can get it easily. Let me see. How do you write my own name? Let's see. Anyways, so I caught on to this idea that beauty has to do something with novelty. And beauty has also something to do with a novel introduction to something that was unknown there before. Like some people don't realize when I give these talks, I mean, on some level, yes, I am kind of conscious of my public display, but at the same time, I am also conscious that every day I have once to look at reality. And when I say once, that means the day finishes. When you realize your day finishes, then you become the CEO of your existence. What that means is your expectations from your mind judge your ability, not the world's expectations from your mind. The world can't see your eyes, so you can't expect the world to know you. Do you know? And so you can only see your eyes, but you in some sense have to find a discrimination of the separation between your inner realms and the outer realms. And guys, this idea of the inner realms and outer realms, and this concept I've developed, the language threshold, these ideas, I'm telling you, these are the most important ideas of our time right now in 2020, as we're moving into an era where we're becoming conscious that we're not the language of our mind. That means right now people are waking up. They're not waking up. It's like an evolution of, just like, imagine how intense it was when the ape stood up on its two legs. All the other apes were like, no way. So similarly now, we are standing up from our subjectivity, our subjective existence. We're advancing, the users of technology are advancing beyond their own definitions. That means we are reaching a domain of human exploration, of conscious activity, where it is no longer just conceptual. And when we wonder, what do we have? What do we have to explore? Seriously, like, as 8 billion creatures on a rock in the middle of nowhere, in how many ways can we explore the cosmos? In what ways can we retaliate against the unknownness of our knowledge in the moment? And there are various ways. Human beings eventually make a decision based on their principal universal philosophy. What does that mean? That means most people don't realize it, but your subconscious is the first moment you took shape as a creature. Subjective shape. The efficiency of the gods is a remembrance of nature's process before your process began. Some sages would say there are two worlds that we live in, and you can say, a new student would say, what are these worlds, sage? Tell us. And the sage would say, one is the world that began from the moment you were born, and in some sense will end the moment you pass away and transition out of this realm. And then there is a world that was here before you and will remain here after you. And you see, that is the world Mr. Within is interested. That is the world where our individual consciousness is living for indirectly. It just doesn't realize it. That deep down, how long can you make the smile of the individual be the contentment of the species? It cannot. After some point, systems break, roars will be heard, marches will be made, and mankind will step anew. That's the reality of it. Tell me one moment in history that did not change, and you will see the world is the true leader of phenomena. And the world has a mind, and it is our responsibility as creatures in the void to comprehend the void. That means, for how many eons are we just going to say imagination is nothing? For how long are we going to say that thought is meaningless, thought is empty? We treat ourselves as thoughts, but we don't believe it's even there. We think it's hollow. That means the world is under the impression that we are thinkers thinking that we are thoughts, only to realize the thoughts are in the void just like the atoms are. So we have a totally different, need to have a totally different game plan. We literally need, like, what's his name? Al Pacino from that movie scene, shouting about fighting for that next inch. Because life, it's unexpected. And those people who don't understand this unexpected quality of life, they try to control it, and when they can't control it, they feel that life is rejecting them, so there's this pent-up hatred. That means, don't think people, guys, just hate people. People hate also worlds. That means when I was young, I did not like animals and insects. And it's not that I didn't like I didn't like animals because of the smell, and I didn't like insects because, why even have that option? But there came a time where it changed. When I was young, it was easy for me to step on ants. But then when I found myself taken to nature again, I realized that life, how dare it stop itself? It has started itself after eons. You think it's going to just stop itself? No. There is a hidden blueprint that is manifesting while the individual lives of human beings are manifesting. And it is the life of the future. That means we think that it's going from the past to the present to the future, But I'm telling you, it's that the past is living its life simultaneously as where the present is living its life simultaneously as where the future is. This is why you have access to your memories, because on some level that existential moment or memory is in some sense still happening. Your attention hasn't left. That means the explanation of human memory is that the mind is actually beyond time. That's why it's governing time in many ways. And so human beings should not be afraid of animating macrocosmic movements. That means we are saying that we are human beings, our free will is moving us, not realizing the whole cosmos is moving. You know what that means? That means most human belief system, most children, when they're writing exams in the educational system around the world, they're solving static problems. And dynamic problems cannot have written answers. They have in some sense, direct actions. That means there will come a time that the general will realize there is no more time for strategizing. It then comes the time for the confrontation of the unknown. The general looks at the battlefield, sees his soldiers, sees in some sense the kingdoms marching to, in some sense, devour theirs. And so it becomes a war of worlds enduring longer in history's eyes. There is defeat, there is victory, there is moments of great embrace and celebration, and there are moments of great sorrow. There are moments where we find our comrades falling on this battlefield, and there are moments where we realize ourselves rising anew. And so the dawn of an advanced civilization requires any sort of effort. As if at some point in the wars of man, we heard the heartbeat of a universe that did not define itself in war. That means we think peace is boring. People think if we all become peaceful in utopia, it's boring. Do you know? And I will say no. A utopia may be boring, but an advanced civilization never. We have to get our right now civilization is in a weird picture mindset. We think it's a picture on a wall. We have to realize it is a river. And every child born, their vision is a drop in this river. And it gets momentum. And that it's not that just history repeats itself. History also re-evokes itself. Do you know? Do you know how many, you see the ancient mind, I share about mysticism, but if we wanted to get angry, there's more reasons to get angry than the past and the future. The future has not happened yet, so you can't get angry at it. But the past has happened, so you can be filled with rage. Do you know there has been days where I have been like the god of war and in some sense destroyed my archetype? And there has been days where my archetype has destroyed me. And so we don't realize it, but there's a level of gentleness that must be allowed. And any human being who who goes against, resists that flow of natural decency, then they will feel this, their soul will feel a guilt. And it's not going to be a guilt of the mind or the body. It's going to be an emotion of incompleteness, kind of slowly infiltrating your character. And what that means is, in some sense, this is the cool thing, guys. If you notice, it's not polite. For example, if you go outside and you shout something at someone, it's not polite. But if you close your eyes and in your inner realm shout, you see there is no, in some sense, it's your own room to some degree. What can I say? You look at even this cat in this video, in this wallpaper I've chosen. You see this cat, guys? This cat has an ability to bite. It has claws, but it is rolling playfully. Do you see that? This cat can be a beast, but it is not engaged in the activity of a beast, and therefore you're not a beast. And so we had this very liberated being in Tibetan Buddhism named Guru Padmasambhava, and this being, he was a bodhisattva. Like literally you read his childhood bio. Guru Padmasambhava pretty much manifested at the age of 8. Like he wasn't born in this world. He just manifested at the age of 8 in the middle of a lotus in a pond. And he started, right when he manifested at the age of 8, he went and started teaching the lake spirits. Imagine this 8-year-old baby enlightening like lake spirits, and then the king finds him. Some king is walking by there and suddenly finds him. You see? And Guru Padmasambhava was such a unique figure that he would walk, he would travel. He was so fearless. He would go on next level journeys. It was as if he had an inner GPS. And so he would go to these towns where there were droughts and there were like certain like irrigation, agricultural issues, you know. And you know, legend has it that Guru Padmasambhava, he would see this like irrigation issues, agricultural issues. He would see that this place had a drought. It wasn't because of the weather. The weather was an interdimensional being, and Guru Padmasambhava would go there in that moment and convert what was seen as back in the day as a sort of monster of another dimension into to Buddhism. That means Guru Padmasambhava, he was at a state of mind where his view on enlightenment was he was not enlightening people. He was enlightening moments of being. That means he was not teaching, his teaching was not physical. He could have spoken, but he was not speaking. There was something else going on. And the stories have it pretty much, if you go and notice certain temples, they have these statues that are not they are like equivalent to the gargoyles of like you find in certain ancient churches, cathedrals, you find gargoyles at the top. Okay? And certain certain Buddhist temples, you do find certain monster-like figures in Buddhist art. And these kind of creatures, these monster-like creatures, they were Buddhist. They were literally like, excuse my language, they were like demons from another dimension that were converted to Buddhism. So what that meant, that regardless of your constitution, your activity defines your nature, your attention defines what you're tuning into. Do you see? So it doesn't matter if you externally are a chaotic entity or externally are an ordered entity, when there is also simultaneously a potential for inner chaos and outer chaos. Imagine you see the most beautiful person, but they have the most cruelest mind. Imagine you see, in some sense, the opposite kind of person, and they have the most beautiful mind. And you see that life is not about just the external matter moving external space. If for a living being, you could say you just need to learn two languages. One language is the language of how matter moves in space, and the moment you become comfortable with space, your reflexes heighten. Your reflexes become instantaneous. That means I can't tell you how many times my hands have held something, like have picked up something, like the same hand dropped it, the same hand grabbed it. And the reason was the hand had a full freedom to go faster than the object in the space. So it's like a language of matter in space, and then a language which is literally language like sound and silence. You know? That means the parent, check it out, the parent, most parents are like, let's see what the first words of my child is, you know? And let's say the child says, I don't know, like, and you're like, my child's gonna be a comedian, my child said A-H-A-H. So, so guys, what I'm saying is the child, before it externalizes, the first word is spoken in the mind. It exists in the inner realm. Meaning exists prior to language. Meaning, this is not something I'm just saying. It's like linguistic professor stretching from Steven Pinker to Noam Chomsky suggests this. Because you can see language was something that was started and then it got crystallized. We are not realizing as human beings how advanced the technology of language is that we're instantly using. What could be the efficiency of the gods? Could it be a state where novelty is there before the time? Because novelty is a new dimension of time, therefore changing your whole thing. Like, we seem to not realize that every experience we have as a human being is like a drop of water in this cup. And when this cup gets filled to the brim, sorry guys, I'm listening to this rock music in the back. It's like I'm realizing it's not the most convenient music to speak to. It's like I'm talking about gentleness, but behind, like with headphones. I have headphones on right now. It's like in the headphones I'm listening to rock music. Oh man. This life moves in many ways. We are a pilot here. We're not just a symbol in a program, in a code. Even though everything in life is really code, after a while, this is how Charles Bukowski put it. They pretty much asked him in an interview, like it was his last Earthbound interview, I think, and pretty much they asked him, how do you see death, man? He was this prolific writer, this very, like his writing style has a honesty to it, which is you don't see often in writing. And Charles Bukowski said he does not fear it. He does not fear death because he's like, after a while, when you run a bunch of laps around the sun, you begin to see patterns, and you begin to see patterns repeating. And so this repetition of patterns is the familiarity. So that means if I wake up in the morning and whatever I experience throughout that day, if I was to, like before I sleep, just contemplate and be like, what was unknown? What was known? What did I know in the day that I did? What was it? What was unknown that happened in the day that I didn't know what had happened? You see, so then you'll suddenly see what was known is a pattern, is pattern recognition. What is unknown is a pattern that is foreign to the mind. That means after some point we realize it doesn't make sense. That means even though you may be a human being, let's say person A and person B, they're in the same world and they're in a park. Okay, person A looks different than person B. Let's say person A has a certain skin color and person B has a certain skin color. Okay, and then person A and B, right? Let's say they get into this war, war of color. Like it's the stupidest thing, fighting over color. I mean, color is color. What are you gonna do? You know, it's like do we you know, it's like I could totally understand. For example, of course, I don't want to. Michael Jackson, for example, he's a very famous person in history. This musician, and he did something which was in a weird way ahead of its time, but at the same time, it wasn't for the time. And so he was a black man who in some sense changed the color of his skin. Now imagine someone had gone to this person and been like, hey, can you change the color of your blood? I mean, sure, you could do surgery, change the color of your skin somehow, but can you change the color of your blood? No, you accept it. It's there. Do any of us fight over the color of our blood? Do we have protests of people saying, change the color of blood to blue? No. We are content. We are okay with it. So think of it this way, that before people disagree, how many things they are just instantaneously, naturally okay with. So in some sense, it's just expression games. In some sense, human beings have never had the same eyes to fight each other. To even see each other, to even be enemies. So what I'm saying is, after a point, it's not the color. You know, it's in some sense the intelligence that is so much more dimensionally free than just identification with just the color. Do you know? Imagine in the future you can go into cyberspace virtual reality and just put on these goggles and be anything you want. You could even be like let's say a ghost in cyberspace reality. You could be anything. You know, you could even let's say in the future they make in some sense how can I say it? Like, imagine you just had access to a virtual reality where you were God and you created a world of cyberspace proportions. And in some sense, in that virtual reality, you created characters that became conscious, but you were the god, and you were moving through all the dimensions because it was your world. And then you'd wake up and you realize, no, that even though you are the god of an artificial world, you are in some sense the creature of a real one. And sometimes you can say language is what's really pioneering virtual reality. If they ask Mr. Within, I think what was his name? What was his name? I remember his last name. Marshall McLuhan. Marshall McLuhan caught on to this. Marshall McLuhan suddenly noticed how revolutionary it was that suddenly we had print. You see, it's kind of like we have to treat every person's mind like a garden, and we have to also treat that they are the immediate gardener. And what that means is, in your mind, you right now, wherever you are, it doesn't matter what age you are, wherever you are, like you could be a creature, like you could be a parallel dimension of humanity listening in, right? It's like, hey guys, we have subscribers from parallel dimensions. Oh man. Really, guys, I can't tell you how much silliness has inspired me towards greatness. Oh man. We have to become responsible for it's like we have become responsible for a singular existence as materialistic creatures, but we have to now become responsible for our multi-dimensional experience of our singular existence. You see? The metaphysics that Mr. Within is suggesting is not one that avoids matter. Matter is the most important thing. Without matter, what is there to imagine? Without light in your eyes of a world, without the first foundation of a world, what is there? The world is like the paper where the viewpoint, where our explorations or our journeys into wondering about what the soul is in some sense how the pen is moving on the blank page. That means your imagination is technically solar powered because it's a deviation from reality, which is found in light. I'm telling you guys, there's more to life than just being a statue in your own mind. Free yourself from words that you never were, because before you learned language, you were being something. And you were being a process of life, And it's this whole debate that people have, especially when it comes to abortion. I've thought about that concept. There was a time I saw a political debate and they were talking about it. And I was like, okay, let's think about this. And it's all about like the identity of the being. And so we see when the child is in the womb, it's part of the process of the mother. Do you see process of the existence of the mother? That means technically human beings are born out of each other's existence. That's kind of mind-blowing, right? So that means the child doesn't exist as itself, it exists as another being, as part of another being. You see? So we can say, especially, there is this saying that when the women of a civilization hate the men of the civilization, the women of the civilization will no longer reproduce. When the women of the civilization don't reproduce, it is pretty much a denial of continuity. And a denial of natural continuity has its own sort of long-term misery, if I can say. So you see, on some level you make a decision, and on some level that decision sets into motion certain events. And when that event is set, it's pretty much kind of like someone writing a business plan. I mean, of course, guys, I'm just sharing my views Aristotle says it's the sign of an educated mind to entertain an idea without accepting it. That means observe many things. Have the freedom to look at many things, but you don't have to accept or do everything. You know what I mean? But you're allowed to look at things in this world. You know, you're allowed to see what is here. There is no, whether religious or secular, there is no ideology that is telling the human being it cannot see where it is. You are allowed as a being. It's your birthright to kind of know who you are. So guys, just because I opened up the idea, here's the thing. It's like before the child has objectively evolved, that means before the child can move on its own, it is in some sense part of the process of the mother. Do you know? That means it's like, you know, on some level, why is it that, for example, like you see it in some intense movies, or I don't know, in some stories you see, like the guy, his hand is infected in battle and they have no choice, and they give this guy like a branch to like bite, and then at the same time they have to cut the infected area of the body so the whole body doesn't get destroyed. So the person has to sacrifice their limb. Do you know they have to disturb their own natural process of being? Do you know? That means when I was thinking, like, probably it's, I mean, of course I'm a guy, but like, for women, I think it's more intense because it's a disturbance. Even the process of abortion is a disturbance of the natural body, right? So it's all about valuation and viewpoint, and I really don't know. I mean, there are people who are freaking out about overpopulation, but I kind of realize if we make sky cities, we won't freak out. So we're only freaking out because we haven't created the space. So most people think when a problem comes, they only need the answer or they can't do anything. Who said? When a problem comes, you can create the space for the answer. Imagine the answer to your greatest problems is a guest and you're the host. And you're like, oh my God, the answer to all my problems is coming over. And so you see, this answer to all problems is in some sense a guest of your mind. That means karma is not just what happens to you. It's how you take it in. How you take it in. Right now I can stand here and totally paint a narrative where I feel I can't move in it. I don't create space for my mind for action. That means it's like, you know what it is? I call it the roar of the lifetime moment. It's a moment in the human being's life where whatever system they've been going on, they will suddenly feel there is something missing out of the picture. And that feeling, that the trusting of the unknown is the rarest thing to see in an information age where the creatures are obsessed about how the knowledge looks like. Trust the unknown and you will already be living in the future. Don't trust the unknown, you're stuck in the past. What can you do? You can't trust anything new because the past can't change. But imagine the past was past. That means imagine the past is like someone you think it's your friend and you come to talk to and you suddenly see that person is gone. You see the past is gone. What can you do? You're always left with where your eyes are moving to, no? You know, sometimes it's kind of like, you know, some people I've seen in this lifetime of mine that I just knew that after that moment I would never see that person again. You know, if we were to take the concept of death seriously, you know, anytime our attention goes away from something, whatever the attention was on before, it's like dead to the attention. It's not there. Guys, I think the most important thing to realize is that communication transcends archetypes. Communication is the archetype, is the evolution of the symbolic life. So there was a time, I'll be honest, in 2011, I was a bit of a savage. That means it's like I really didn't, I mean, I can't say it's kind of different, but it's like I didn't care for people. I cared for what I wanted out of them, what I wanted from them. Do you know? And that was in 2011, and I can tell you I was pushed into a karmic quarantine. You know what that means? That means, like, this karmic quarantine felt like this, guys. It felt like, imagine a father back in the day, the village is under siege, the father is picking up a weapon and going out, and his little son wakes up in the night and he's like, Father, I want to come. You know, I'm going to come to war. And the father is like, no, go back to bed. You know? And the kid wants to come to war, and the father pushes back the kid and closes the door and goes outside to defend the village. So you see, that kid technically is a weird karmic moment for it, because it ran towards something but was pushed back. And I don't know how many people see it, but I've had too many experiences of this to not be kind of certain of it on some level. That's not all moments are for everyone. Not all moments are for everyone. Freedom doesn't mean everything is for everything. Because then there would be nothing evolving. You see, you can say, could anarchy lead to a utopia where the destruction of the problem is no problem? So it's like, you know, a way to have peace is in some sense destroying everything. Then there's nothing left to be in pieces to even find its peace. You see what I mean? So some people, they just wanna, it's like they find themselves as an actor in a story they dislike, and they're like, what is this? And they want to get rid of being that actor. Not realizing that that's what was set into motion by your program of vision. That means, you know how many times I've asked myself, why this idea? Why am I looking at this in this way when there are so many other ways? You know what I mean? Here's the thing, guys. I feel that it's okay to treat an object as an object. But an object that is a subject to itself cannot be treated just like an object. Do you know that means, imagine an extraterrestrial came down to Earth, and we were looking at that extraterrestrial and we were like, whoa, an alien came down, and we all tried talking to the alien, but the alien ignored us. And we were like, why? Our greatest philosophers were like, why is this alien ignoring us? And we realized because we appear like an object to the alien doesn't care about our minds, so we're like an object to it. When you don't care about the mind of a being, then they become like Lego. Do you know? And that's dangerous. So on some level, the respect in the unknown is not just seen in self, you have to see the unknown in others. That's why life is exciting. If you think it's all known, inevitably the unknown will be like, no, it isn't. You know, there's definitely a phase in mysticism where the guy's like meditating in the cave and he's like, I must be enlightened now, you know? And then the whole universe says, no, no, man, keep going. The guy's meditating and he's like, I must be enlightened now, you know? And the voice says, no, not even close. And eventually the guy stops asking and starts looking. The person discovers the language of the eyes. Oh, this is so key, that your eyes are living a life. Yeah, guys, how hilarious would it be if Saul was just kind of commenting on that alien thing I said, and it's like, how, like, really, it'd be hilarious, you know, the alien just doesn't care. We're like, alien, we've all been waiting for you. The alien's like, I don't care, man. You know? I don't care for contact. I just came here to get apples from a tree, you know? I mean, I think, Sabu, you're picking up on something, because really, in Zen, there was this Zen story. They came and asked this guy. This guy went to this enlightened sage and was like, how long does it take for me to get enlightened? The guy sage is like, 10 years. You know? And then the guy's like, how long would it take if I worked really hard and intensely every day? The guy thinks and he's like, 20 years. And that's the thing. If you want the world to move, you gotta let it move first. And that requires decent and simple observation of the moment before you animate as an archetype, as a character with archetype base. Because I was like, what is Carl Jung doing? Like, honestly, guys, there was a moment I was like, yeah, Carl, why? Why did you create the concept of archetypes? And I realized he was trying to create an alphabet of images that the soul is speaking through. Archetypes is the language of the soul. Similarly to how Marcus Aurelius says, is the alphabet. It's the alphabet of the soul. That was Carl Jung's genius, I think. He in some sense realized there is this language of image. And in that image, the human being has character. That means, do you know in how many ways you can observe your own memories? I don't know if people realize this. Do you know how many times, every time I remember my memories, I see something new about it? And I've often wondered, is that new because there's a sort of self-generation in the moment? That means, like, right now, if I remember where I was 10 years ago, the image comes of me being in, like, you know, seeing my own reflection, like in this pool when I was like 7 years old, let's say, like way longer than 10 years ago. But like the image comes to me. There's that image. That image, that language of image, that intelligence seems to be moving through before this language of image is translated to a symbolic attribution system of language. That's where the mystery is. That's how every human being should realize, literally, if their mind was an antenna, how is it receiving your moment? How are you receiving your moment, dear listener? Because I'm telling you, sometimes the world could be endlessly giving you gifts, but you're not reaching out to take them. And what does that mean? That means when man wondered about his relationship with the potential living mind of the universe, as if the whole universal sector had a mind, Honestly, guys, without trust, novelties cannot be born. And sometimes certain decisions are just set into motion, and it's contentment. And so it's this idea that if there has been an intention, you see, actions are done at the height of their. Think of it this way. Think of this life as a very multidimensional system, many different kinds of system, and all these systems are at the same time in one kind of system. Similar to how we look at the body and how the body is conducted as a whole phenomenon, like the whole body is functional, but it has certain compartments. Do you know? So it's as if, like, in some sense, we can say that all thought is the organization of how matter moves in space. Really, if nothing moves, what is there? Movement is life. Living has to do with movement. And I think this is the thing, that human beings can't just pause their life like a video game. And that it's something where these are sort of genetical commitments to existence. That means your DNA, it's like, it's pretty much like the book you are meant to be. Do you know? Right now, civilization is moving beyond an objective relationship and a subjective relationship, and that means for the first time there's coming the urgency for direct experience to be shared. You know, we're like a tribe that suddenly got this advanced technology, and it's like, okay, let's do the best we can. And what's the best is that we pretty much, how many human beings are living their lives in just silence? Do you know? So many people are living in silence. You know, that means it's like we have, even when you look at evolution and the scale of history, we have been in silence way longer than we have spoken. So language is the new technology, technically. You know, and so this technology is so fascinating that it has made us feel like creators in certain domains of creation. In certain ways we've created stuff. Like, for example, this talk that I'm saying, like, I get a sense, I feel like I'm creating it. But then I realize what I'm speaking about is the world, and in some sense the world is everything, you know? You know, you first go look for, like, let's say, this is human life. The child is born, and it is in some sense walking through a playground. The world doesn't expect much from the young human being. This child is in a playground, and suddenly this child will suddenly hear bombs go off, recognizing that this playground was never a playground and that it's a battlefield. And so, similar to how children would play on swings, it's like politicians in the future making decisions that influence masses of people. So you see, in some sense, it's a transformation of the experience of what is activity. That means you are transformed by your efforts in this world. You're not just, like, it's not just, like, we're not just playing cat and mouse games with God, you know? Something else is happening. A need for a new behavioral pattern in this whole system is required. And the need, as Jordan Peterson would so profoundly inspire people towards, he was saying that we need an ethos, that we creatures are not just creatures that live off of food, water, shelter, and like even emotional love and all this, you know, belonging and whatnot, you know, or even visions of legacy or whatnot and self-worth. It's like that we are also, just like food, water, and shelter, we also need a story to live in. Because then you really won't be an individual. And those, it's like there's two kinds of people. There's ones walking in society where they see actually what's happening in life because their inner realms has returned to the void. That means you realize there was nothing wrong with matter. It's like this, all those people who were trying to escape in ancient times the world as an illusion realized that the truth was was in the illusion. That means how is the illusion there? Some truth is projecting it. That means the simulation never existed when on a macro scale. That means whatever human beings say, whatever our beliefs is, the uniqueness of human design suggests architecture. That means when we looked at ourselves as creatures, just like looking at the great grandest towers that human civilization has gone towards building, we in some sense saw design. We are creatures of design. Now, Mr. Within is saying the mind is occurring in a way where it's simultaneously, the self is designing the world and the world is designing the self. So we are literally a sort of constant, endless back and forth. Most people don't realize it, but when you breathe, in every inhale and exhale, it's like your inhale is a breath for your mind. Or let me say it like this: your inhale is a breath for your body, your exhale is a breath for your mind. It's an inhale for your mind, strangely. What I mean by that is, like, after some point, you ask yourself, like, looking for truth is asking, like, who dressed me? You know? That's exactly it. People are like, yo, man, yo, who am I? What's my purpose? What's my truth? What's my true self? Tell me, show me. And I'm like, okay, you know, let's say hypothetically there was a mirror for the mind. You would eventually see what you've worn. You know? That means everybody has access to an unconditional state of any sort of deviation or flexibility of image to be truth in the inner realms. You know, that means we're 8 billion beings that are existing at the same time, like a video game. Inside the video game as video game characters in a physical world. Your outer realms are the same. That means the only way I'm sharing this podcast with you is because me and you are existing on the same rock in the middle of nowhere. You see what I'm saying? So in front of our eyes, one world we're all in. Behind our eyes, this world appears differently. Because the mind, there's inner space that we can't really speak about because it's where speech is happening. It's like wanting to see inside the engine of a car while driving very fast in a highway. Do you know? You see, after some point you realize life is either just what you see or it's more. And Mr. Within is telling you, whoa, it's way more. Like anything that I see, you know, I even consider my existence right now to be a tiny percentage of my being. That means, you see, for some people, they see the word human being as one thing. As in both words, their meanings are in like one dimension. Okay? Like, yeah, I'm a human being. You know, I'm being human right now. But you see, the human dimension is a design dimension. The biological program really has to do with your awareness of the design of phenomena. But you see, the being component is not design. It's the seer of design. It's the awareness. It's how the mind is existing as awareness to itself before existing as any sort of subjective mask of itself. And by the way, guys, feel free to ask a question about what I'm saying. Like, here's the thing. Like, what I expect from the audience usually, like, it's like this: that philosophy is an attempt to pretty much translate the unknown. So when somebody speaks, it's a new event. Now, this new event has a sort of speed and momentum, and after a while, other people can kind of stretch it. Because when I speak, I don't speak like a dotted arrow going forward. I speak like it's branching out. I branch out concepts pretty much when I speak, because as I'm saying them, I see the relationship in a certain dynamism that inevitably it just stretches out. You see the inner realms, you have a lot of space for movement. You can literally sit down and before you physically do something, in your mind attempt it. Do you know how many times I was like, okay, before like I put my physical energy into this action, let me just close my eyes and in my mind visualize myself, how many ways can I do this? So in some sense, it's a suggestion that the mind can solve puzzles that the body cannot even be aware of. The mind is like it's just pretty much our advantage as human beings. You know, if you saw human existence as a business entity, it's as if like there is a long-term vision and there's a short-term vision. The short-term vision is like the first prototype of the business model, or an attempt at the most efficient view of the business is being seen. When someone starts a business, it's really information that really helps you. And anything you do in this life, you got to kind of be aware of what the activity is happening. Imagine you're an anthropologist and you've gone to, for example, like some, I don't know, rare tribe, and you're studying that tribe. You know, Terence McKenna in his book, True Hallucinations, I was listening to the audiobook where this man is recounting, it's an account of his like journey in the Amazons in search for, like he's like that Western man who, Terence McKenna is like that guy who cared enough to go see what the metaphysics of ancient tribes were. In what he was saying, that he saw this like blonde anthropologist girl who had gone to these, I don't know, she had become the wife of this, I forget the name of the tribe, this unique kind of tribe, and the tribe was a bit male chauvinistic where the men would kind of listen to radios all day and the women would do all the work, and the women lived even in a different part of the house. So that means the men lived in the house, the women lived downstairs of the house. Like it was this, you know, primitive society, relatively, you know. And so this girl had chosen from the liberties, as if from liberties of like a Western environment, come to this kind of tribe in the Amazons and live this intense life. And I wondered, I asked myself why. And I realized because she wanted to see the experience of it. And when we realize we're not just here as human beings and we don't want to just concepts, we're not like, you know, it's not like, the mind just needs to devour conception all the time. After some point, you realize life is not too much even about ideas. It's about experience. And that experience is literally, they say, like, a picture is 1,000 words, you know, an experience is like 1,000 concepts, you know? It's as valuable it's more valuable than 1,000 concepts or something. Like it's one of those things where you see, why do you have subjects on objects? If you ask yourself that question, do you know how many illusions evaporate? Why am I subject to myself? Why am I this subject to myself? Why am I this? Why in this moment of being is this idea being me? Do you see? And then your own life unfolds, and the mysteries of your own eyes, your inner realms begin at moving advance, and then your outer realms move advance. You know, so you start off with behind your eyes, you have the privilege of living in an advanced civilization before you have the privilege of externally living in one. The mind has certain freedoms of observation that if we just thought we were material creatures, we would limit ourselves. And so what can I say? the efficiency of the gods could be that man sees suffering, but God does not. That means imagine like man suddenly found an audience with the voice of the universe, and the universe, God was like, what is it? What do you want, man? You know? And man was like, God, why is there this suffering? Why did you create this messed up system where people are just suffering and dying? Why couldn't you create a better system? You know? And God says, who says suffering is suffering? Who says that perhaps this human life is the greatest roller coaster for an eternal being? That means when we think of ourselves as temporary creatures, yeah, it's frightening. You know, it's like, what are you scared of? Oh, non-existence. You know? And so they're like, okay, you really like, can you imagine, you know, this is something playful. I want to see how like a psychologist, like a clinical psychologist would react, you know? It's like, I want you to help me, you know, get over my fear. What is that fear? Fear of non-existence, you know? And the psychologist is like, okay, I don't have that one on the list. And how do you get rid of someone's fear of non-existence when all human beings are temporary? That psychologist would look at, let me tell you, if I was I'll tell you, like from the shoes of the patient asking that from the clinical psychologist, it's like, I want to get rid of my fear of non-existence, you know? And then the psychologist is like, what do I do? Sing songs of eternity for this person? Like, and so you see, the psychologist would say, how can you fear non-existence? You see, oftentimes people don't realize human beings are the best mirrors of each other. This is why they say, like it's like pretty much it echoes in history that a good friend is like an honest mirror of your mind. This is why it's like communication must even be done just for the sense that you get a feedback of how you're being a character in this world. This cat in this picture may be like, why is this happening right now? You know? But it will realize it's designed to go through it. There was a scene in, I think it was a deleted scene in the movie Gladiator. Like, unless you got the limited edition, you wouldn't see. And Gladiator by far is like, for me, if, like, you know, for me, I can tell you the film Gladiator was so ahead of its time, that it's as if like you can see endless stories like that just projecting after. This is the cool thing about, okay, anyways, here's the deleted scene. Pretty much Maximus is about to be sent above the Gladiator arena, and there's this scene where this guy, what's his name? The guy who betrays him at the beginning, but then ends up becoming like was always his friend from the beginning. Like that general that honored him. That general, in some sense, comes to Maximus before he's about to go and fight the emperor or something and says, Maximus, I can get you out of here. I can get you out of here. You know? Lee, like you want me to get you out of here. And Maximus was just smiling. And Maximus responds, and he says, nature never puts one in a situation where it hasn't prepared them for. This is the power of your free will. That yes, in certain situations it's unknown, there's fear, you don't know what's going to happen. But once you implement, maybe you were prepared from the beginning for that moment. Do you know, I didn't know I could even give these talks. But one day I was like, all right, let's see how my voice sounds. You know, it's like simpler events eventually build up to complexities. This is the secret about success that people have not said. That it's a journey. And in the journey, you transform. And the failure is just a step on the staircase. It's the introduction. Usually when you fail, people should be happy when they fail, because that means the spirit of that reality has accepted you. That means usually it's like this. Because the inner realms are strangers, there's distance. So all communication is starting not from just an assumption of closeness, it's starting from distance. You know, I mean, in Persian culture, for example, it's different. In Persian culture, there's an assumption of closeness that I don't see, for example, in Western cultures as much. Do you know that means it's all about individualism and it's all about collective value? Do you know? So that means all actions have two sides of a coin. They have an individual value and they have a collective value. Me giving this talk right now has an individual value, has a collective value. Me drinking coffee has an individual value, has a collective value, but its collective value is little, its individual value is a lot, like when I drink that coffee in the morning. You know? So, but the collective value is just me. I'm just drinking a cup of coffee. But for example, when we utilize the internet, this thing that this like believe it or not, supernatural event, super cybernatural this supernatural digital event that has taken place, like we gotta use it. It's like, you know, the internet is like this spaceship that's fallen out of nowhere, you know, in the middle of like a jungle, you know? For me, a technology will not evolve unless the attention of human beings energizes the motivation of that vision. That means in this life, after some point, you'll care for things so much bigger than your personal archetypes, you'll laugh. You know, then after some point, it's like the big doesn't bother you when you're comfortable with the small. That means if you are comfortable going in a room and everybody in that room, like let's say there's a social fire, you know, if you can stand in the flames and you see nothing happens, then the flames don't bother you. Do you see? So that means if your attention is on a much more advanced vision of life, you don't really suffer from the inefficiencies that much. So for me, I just need to kind of we need to get this civilization seeking efficient patterns. Vision, you can put an equal sign and call it efficient vision. Efficient vision is like, or let me say like this, success is an efficient vision. An efficient vision means that you have dared to see something that no one has cared to see that far into the system. It doesn't mean you're seeing far. It just means you require novelty. That means the first employee that any business should, in some sense, hire should be an employee that makes the mind of the business advance. What does that mean? That means like you go and look at so many corporate workspaces and I'm like, what is this? Are we robots? Like, and so it's like Google got it correct. You see, it's strangely when you give freedom to people, they become responsible for themselves. You take freedom, people, they will hold you responsible. So the government has to just give rather than take, and any political system that changes the sails towards this direction, where the system is giving more than it's taking, even if you're a person that you're giving more than you're taking, you will see the rhythms of life change for you. And there's different types of giving. Sometimes you give because you want an effect. But sometimes you give because that is what the cause is. The sun, it's like, it was Hafiz, he says, after all this time, the sun doesn't look at the earth and say, you owe me. Look at what happens with a life like, oh man, let me just look it up. There's too many details in this. Alright guys, here's the exact quote from Hafez, the Sufi mystic from 700 years ago. He says, "The sun never says to the earth, 'You owe me.' Look what happens with a love like that. It lights the whole sky." That's the thing. That means we have to, what was his name? Bertrand Russell, this notable atheist. The interviewer asked him, like, what's your advice to the future generations? And he gave this moral advice of tolerance and charity. And this charity means that we have to be so much more patient than we can be even. That means you, just like imagine you're a runner, marathon runner, when you run, so you're having this endless vision. You're like, I'm going to go as far as I can in this race, right? So it's like endless effort, you know? Oh man, language has evolved in so many ways, guys. I feel we have to attempt the designing of a new narrative. That means it's not enough for human beings to just wake up in the morning and think they're just human beings. You know, it is enough on some level in the inner realms, but for the outer realms, it is not enough. Any advanced movement needs to have advanced involvement. That means some people wondered how would okay, just a second, guys. So anyways, guys, before I continue, Savu asks a question. What is your point of view about Osho? What do you mean about Osho, Savu? You want me to like comment on how I see the guy as a person? I mean, I don't know. I wasn't around when he was around, but it was like I could tell you that I got introduced to Osho's quotes first, and then I saw who he was, and then I realized who he was the choice of his inner realms. But what his contribution was to the outer realms was the choice of how the outer realms saw him. You know? That means any person that could be in front of you, you can instantly choose to not care for their existence. Do you know that there were times where people I didn't know, like there was the situation where this random person I didn't know came and insulted me. And I had no reaction. My reaction was after the person insulted me, I was like, who are you? Do you know? And so the idea was this. Do you know that it was in some sense a sort of that person didn't have an existence in my mind. This is why they say if you hate someone, that person technically has an existence in your mind. That means you had to care first. You hate for those who don't see you as you want to see yourself, as yourself wants to be seen. There is that kind of dynamic in the mind of human beings that leads to tension. But I'm saying when we are not When we value the spirit of the unknown, we are more interested in seeing how the world happens than just the ideological constitution of how it's valid in a snapshot. Like, you know how many moments there are? You know how many ways there are of looking at the world, as much as there are eyes. And you can say the mind is watching the eyes and the eyes are watching the world. That means your eyes exist to give you access to sensory perception. Your sense is pretty much, your body is like a sensory antenna. It's like an antenna translating your moment into what it is. And you know what this means, guys? That means the mystery of all psychology, philosophy, and all branches of academia returns to the one unknown thing. Light entering the eye. Our eyes. Just the action, like the actual full, like light entering your eyes. It is there where the mystery is, and that mystery is so primordial compared to every other ideological system that has developed so far. It is the mystery where at some point human beings are like, wait a minute, did we create our own language in emptiness? Oh man. That's the moment where the education system will experience a sort of apocalypse, and it will realize knowledge is not just for passing down images throughout the eons. It is also for finding new images. That means an educational system that doesn't make the child feel like at the frontiers of the exploration of humanity's greatest efforts of comprehending itself and its mind and its being. Like, let me tell you, you have to extract your honor from this world by caring for something and just going and seeing what happens. Really, after some point, there's not too much of a belief system thing. There's no answer to it. It's just unknown. So what that means is it's as if like the world is living its life while you're living your life of the world, you know, your view of the world. So it's like we are inside a river, but we are our own current, you know. This river is pretty much the entropic nature of reality, stretching from cosmic inflation to suddenly, you know, in a very short time span after the Big Bang, manifestation just popping out. As if like, who knew the Big Bang was a Jack in the Box where the Joker inside the box, you know, was in some sense already designed. So what that means is, for me, the Big Bang technically cannot define emptiness. So what that means is, in the scientific perspective, the Big Bang is like a gift. Like you opened up a box and stuff fell out of it, you know? But in some sense, the box and the stuff were designs before the cosmic inflation. That means, how was the seed of the design of manifestation there from the beginning? Now, this is the thing that only human beings are asking this. That means, imagine if somebody goes to heaven and the guy's like, am I here till all eternity? You know, and the voice in heaven says, nah man, there's no time here. There's no time. Like, it's not that you're eternal or temporary, it's just there's no time. Nobody wears watches up here, you know. And so you suddenly realize that the conception of man is so bound into its most basic way it has been defined, that we are like our ideological senses of self upon our objective being are like titans shackled by, in some sense, space and time as the parameters of its objective definition. That means right now we have opinions on our mind like our body, and we're like, the mind, you know, it's visualization, it's imagination, you know. You see, but you see it's not. It is an activity. It is the process. It is the Whiteheadian process. It is the Fullerian, you know, Buckminster Fuller's God verb. They asked Buckminster Fuller, like, he gave such a badass answer, you know. They asked him, hey, Buckminster Fuller, and he's like, what's up? You know, and they're like, Buckminster Fuller, do you believe in God? And he's like, I don't believe in God as a noun. God is a verb. And the questioner was like, I don't know what to say to that. And what I mean by that is that it's kind of like, it is a process. and it's an unknown living process, and that's a safe assumption. That's more of a safe assumption than we're all just hollow at we're somehow atoms hallucinating mindhood and selfhood. And because anytime you treat your life like a simulation, you stop caring for it deep down. That means it's kind of like when you're talking to someone and then you suddenly see that they're being artificial, and then you just stop talking. Do you know how many times, like in life, you see many types of minds, and it's a good thing because not all minds are meant to communicate. Not all minds fit together, you know. But in some sense, communication is a free space. That means we're all. It's like, in the video game, in that multiplayer online video game. Let's say all those people playing behind their computer screens, they were all comfortable with the characters in the video game, but they weren't comfortable with who they were behind the screen. And kinda in society, our identities in this kind of like in the fabric of society, they are like characters in a video game. And I'm telling you, even though I'm speaking right now, no one can see my eyes, and I cannot see the edge of your eyes. Because after some point, you are you. You see? So individualism is like we're oscillating between modes of life where we're like, yeah, all right, I'm noticing how I'm an individual. In my conscious waking state, I'm an individual. You know, or you function as an individual. But in dream states, you can be your mind. That means you can choose to feel like in an altered state of consciousness, like you're a character and the world is moving you without your control. You could feel like a character in the world, or you could feel the world in the character. That means I've experienced something in certain dreams. Like once, I could say, I had this dream where I had the will inside the dream to change the world. So let's say somebody has a dream, and let's say it's like a conscious dream, or some people call it as a lucid dream. That lucid dream is in some that kind of dream. In the dream state, you can move as a character in a world, and again as the world moving the character. So if you have the freedom to, in a dream state, go left, let's say walk left or walk right in the dream while you're dreaming, while your body's asleep in bed. So that means there's also the same freedom for the world to move like the body. That means you don't know how much that I have come to attempted something complex, and in attempting it, my mind automatically has seen that the attempt of understanding is the simplicity. Something must be said that the inner realms You know, there's a quote. I'm gonna direct the talk differently. There is a quote that says, "Vision is the art of seeing that which is invisible to others." And when I looked at that quote is from Jonathan Swift. And it's a really Swift quote. And he says, that means your vision, and if we change the word art as a process, that most people think of creativity as the outcome, but it's actually a process. In this moment, your eyes are the moment. So John, I want to say that that's incredible. That's exactly like the best thing I could hear. That a human being becomes life sensitive and then begins noticing that it's not just the obsession of the human life. No, it's just that life in nature, we tend to see it reduced to a simplicity of just the animal in nature. But then you realize if you were that animal in nature, how can I tell you? There is an inner nature and the outer nature. The inner nature is anytime you become aware of your presence. The outer nature is anytime you become aware of the presence of nature. And the inseparability of how you are an individual to yourself and how your mind is simultaneously being all the space, all the collective notions. The simultaneity of the unconscious mind and the conscious body. That simultaneity is when the vision moves you. There are times where I have to move the vision in these talks, but there's times where the vision moves me. That means the inner film is too dynamic. So you can become conscious of it. I don't want to say it's a strange pattern of reverting to a dehumanization of the archetypal ego. The secrets of nature can only, it's like nature chooses. That means imagine you're with someone you really love. And as if when I say this love doesn't mean it's attached to a shape. It just means care. Let's say your sibling, let's say your family, let's say your close friends, let's say even a member of your human civilization in an alien attack. You know what I mean? So you see that the mind that doesn't fear its stillness and silence opens up to all movements and noises in the world by being able to confront them, by being able to walk through the flames of whatever happens in the moment. The moment has a life. There was a time where I was suffering and I'm like, I have to give freedom to suffering too. That means the life is like, you can treat it as if it's alive, or you can treat it as it's lifeless. If it's lifeless, you are only moving your mind, so there's not even the potential for rhythmic. That means it's your filters for perception have been narrowed by ideological precision. There is a time where the language, like a hat, must be put down, and the person has to confront the reality of it all. Here, guys, I'll say it. Remembering nature leads to remembering your nature. I will tell you, nature is way more better than any voice on paper. Nature doesn't judge. Have you noticed this? That means the lion and the gazelle, they go into the system where the gazelle's running from the lion. There is fear, there is animal instincts at work. But the moment the lion gets the gazelle, it's as if the lion didn't think that gazelle deserved to die, that gazelle was a bad gazelle, that gazelle, was in my land. It didn't have those viewpoints. The lion didn't see a morality. The lion had no conscience. Its conscience, its imagination was inseparable from the ecosystem. But the human being's imagination, the vision, is separated, from the environment. This is why we say we have free will. This is why social media was very helpful for civilization, not just because it was just a communication advantage. It was also because it was a place where people could express. They could express something. They could be something. You see, our digital lives are attempts at being something to something. But I'm telling you, it's all hovering in nothing. So what are we really? So we should break the locks on the gates and reopen the mysteries of the world. This world has dropped itself from the greatness of myth, that myths were said, to, in some sense, it has descended. It has allowed itself entertain a descended notion of the world. That means if you had one lifetime to see your efficient self or your inefficient self, it's your choice. I realized I suffered because I let myself see an inefficient version of me before the efficient. And it was only when I was in that inefficient view, I was like, why am I so inefficient? Then I wondered, my solution is right in front of me. That in all that time that I was thinking I was inefficient, I could have been efficient. I could have cared for my eyes. And when you don't care for your eyes, you feel the world has rejected you, and then there's this pent up, inner realm anguish in the outer realms. Anguish is a very intense feeling, guys. I've experienced a sort of both not an existent, like an experiential anguish that projected a sort of existential anguish. Anyways, guys, any question about the mind, if anybody has, or just vision or the inner realms or whatever, feel free to ask that. I am really interested in, you guys don't understand. If anybody asks about the title, that's where, I don't know, I sometimes I wonder when people listen, is the linguistic structure literally in their inner realms, are they seeing the language first or are they seeing the image? For example, when I speak, I'm literally seeing an inner film, and I'm just putting words to that inner film.
Okay, there was a time where I would look for words first and then try to evoke the inner film, but it doesn't work that way. You got to get the ball rolling internally and then externalize. Yeah, so I'm saying it's just an opportunity cost. It's just a recognition that in any moment of your life, whatever way you behaved, you could have behaved in any other way. Think of just like the endless options. It's kind of like a dancer. Like you dance in one way and then you're like, I could have totally done it, something totally different. You see what I mean? So once we have this inner freedom, that's like the beginning. Once you are content, you know, that's good. Then comes you see your world. It's kind of intense, guys. It's like it's like literally like I think just pretty much how every child in this world has felt at some point. That the meaning of reality changes when the direction of what's happening in the world deviates from that gentleness. You know, they say there's two kinds of virtue. There is the virtue of the person, of the child who's innocent. That means it's like people don't realize how chaotic war is. Like I was kind of like breaking inside when I realized that even as I'm speaking now, there are countries that are being destroyed, literally. It's raining destruction. And so imagine a child, imagine a young child who's just familiar with playing and suddenly sees chaos. Do you see? It's like we don't need to bring the apocalypse sooner in people's eyes. War is so meaningless that it's like only when the sword is put down will the greatest brush of the master painter be found. Only when a certain agitation and non-acceptance of the world, like a heavy backpack is thrown aside from your back, like you just put down that backpack, then there is the space of realizing the new humanity is co-creative. That means when a person communicates, you're in some sense responsible for your existence in that moment. Do you know? And that's why samurai had honor. You can say the armor of the mind of the samurai was honor, but the mind of the ninja wasn't honorable. That means if you were to look at how many samurais died and many ninjas died and what their view of the world was, the ninja who had been deceptive was probably taken by deception. That means when you act at a certain, let's say, frequency with the world, you echo that. Unless you get out of that view, everything you see could be that view. Oh wow, we have Savu listening from Romania. Guys, that's a cool thing. Like anybody who tunes into these talks, just whenever you tune in, also like you can write the time and this town or country you're listening from. The ninja is open to deception. So the mind, the ego of the ninja has no morality. The ninja could act like the friend of the samurai, then stab the samurai in the back. But the samurai had honor. That honor meant a certain level of naturalness must be preserved. At least that's how I see it, guys. I'm just one guy talking, you know. Yeah, that's true. I mean, you know, you can't, like, you can definitely take the Marxian argument in many places, you know. I think we're just becoming aware of the linguistic simulation. So if we feel life is a simulation, but it's actually not. At best, it's an unknown process where the you can say advent, or just like the all our knowledge, all the educational system should just be exploring, not forcing children snapshots of the world where by the time they go into the world, those snapshots have changed. The ninja is like, you know how Bruce Lee was like, be like water? The ninja had to be like the environment. So the ninja had to imagine you're a ninja and you're sneaking to go kill a samurai, and you notice there's a tiger like right inches away from your face while you're sneaking somewhere. So the the ninja's like, okay, random tiger in my face. What do I do? I gotta kill a samurai too, you know. And what that ninja does probably in that instant is probably elbow the tiger's jaw. This story is becoming too intense, guys. I think pretty much the ninja just gets out of there, or just acts like as if he's nothing in the moment. The human mind, like even Confucius, guys, has this story where Confucius and his disciples are walking by this like small waterfall, and there's this old man on the top of it who's walking to cross it, and suddenly the old man falls with the basket, and at the same time a NASCAR car comes in and jumps from a ramp, and the guy falls into the NASCAR car. No, I'm joking. What happens is the guy falls into the water. Confucius and his disciples are like, whoa. Confucius and his disciples are like, whoa, what is this? You know, and so the guy falls into the water, but he comes back as if nothing happened. And the disciples are kind of shocked, but Confucius suddenly smiles. He's figured it out. He goes up to the guy and he's like, hello, kind sir. I thought you were an old man with a basket, but now I see you're a spirit because you fell from the waterfall and nothing happened to you. And the old man looks at Confucius offended, and he's like, I'm not a spirit, man. I'm not a ghost. I'm an old man. And then Confucius also goes into shock. And Confucius says, then how did you not get destroyed by the water at the end of the waterfall? The old man says, because the moment I fell into the water, I was not the old man. I was the water. But the moment I came out of the water, I was the old man. It was a multidimensional relationship. It was a gift of the inner realms to the outer realms. We're freed from enslaved programs of constant habitual reactions to how time is a direction. Guys, every person had honor in regards to starting something. They had some truth they were fighting for. But I'm saying, like, from each of their inner realms, they each had their own honor. But I'm saying, when it came to the outer realms, I mean, like, the samurai is a warrior. There was an honor that you face your opponent when you fight it. So the ninjas wouldn't face their opponent. They would literally cover their face. So the ninja wouldn't face. I mean, granted, the samurai would also have masks, but like, you know, because they're like, all right, these ninjas throw stuff at our face. We gotta do something about this. So for me, the ninja. Let me reframe it, John. I would say the ninja could have been honorable. Could have lived exactly like the samurai in the village, but the ninja did not fight honorably. That's what I'm trying to say. I'm not saying they didn't have. I mean, I guess on some level, when you don't fight honorably, you don't have honor. But like, maybe in other moments of their lives they have. You don't know. In the whole lifetime of the human being, maybe the person's honor is universal. There's sometimes that I honor certain things that it doesn't matter if I'm in Iran or if I'm in Canada. It doesn't matter where I am in the world. It's just like you're honoring the position of existence in an advancement. You're honoring how the garden of existence is flowering into various different dimensions. Like you look at a flower, you're like, what is this? You know, what, like, if a person looks at a sunflower, guys, in my childhood, I had the privilege, you look at the sunflower and you're like, what is this shower, you know, shower head of a plant, you know? And you see the geometry of the seeds, and you see that in nature there is a geometrical expression. That means there is incredible symmetrical organized patterns occurring somewhere where the ancient Greeks were like, you don't see straight lines in nature. That means nature doesn't grow into a straight line. You don't see like suddenly like it's like, you know, plants grow like skyscrapers appearing out, popping out of nowhere. You know, they go through chaotic modes, and in the overall picture there is an order to them. So as long as you see yourself as an individual, do you know how many ways you can identify with suffering? But the question comes, are you really suffering, or are you waiting for something? It's like some people don't have a problem really, they're just bored that their attention isn't moving. You can say boredom is a sign that your speed, your intelligence is not moving at its natural speed. Its natural speed would be one where it's excited. That means if you thought excitement was normal and the lack of it wasn't, we'd see civilization become advanced so quickly. Let me tell you guys, there's no point of people, I think to some degree, writing to-do lists and to-be lists. You just have to close your eyes and be like, what is important? And asking that honest question from yourself, and then seeing the honest answer of your mind. But guys, I don't know, I mean, everything, there is a complexity to it. Like when you see another human mind, like when you see people walking in the street, you don't go like, those are just objects moving around in three-dimensional space. You go, there's minds there. There's organizations that are invisible. That means there's certain things that you can perceive in your inner realms and never be able to communicate because the concept doesn't exist. And the evolution of language begins with the will to move towards uncharted territory. That means don't fear the uncharted territories of your life. You know, you only fear when you have something to lose, and that means you have a belief on yourself before you have an accurate experience of what the world is. That means you have the belief from self is in the driver's seat rather than the belief of what the actual world is. I mean, it's fine. I'm not saying like, you guys. I gotta share my honest viewpoint is that all those communities, New Age communities that are talking about affirmations, yes, writing is an externalization. So you're saying by writing something down, you are making it more real for yourself. You know, but on some level, it's not just about like techniques. I'm telling you, skill is not just about technique. Skill is about why is there the need for it to be there. Guys, I really need to get a new keyboard. This keyboard is making me feel it's a typewriter. Like that's when you know you need to get a new keyboard. You know, when your keyboard makes you feel like you're using a typewriter. I don't know, guys. This world is like, I'm just saying, here's a nice way of engaging it. There's an objective realm. It has its own behaviors, its laws, and it's a collective space. That means you gotta honor the mind of the world, not just your own mind. Because inevitably it is all you, but on some sense you is that. So for me, guys, I'll tell you, it's like when people share their inner realms, that's fascinating to me always. So in the comment section, you can share as much as you want. Pretty much, it's like an open canvas. Everybody's coming and drawing their own thing on this wall, the wall of the chat section. But guys, I'm asking people to write really good stuff, because one day in the future they might come and look at these talks and they'll they'll be like, look at the Elder Scrolls of this chat section. Really, I just feel creation is man's game, and it's the best game he's playing. That we are moving into an era. Okay, guys, I'm gonna kind of bring the talk to an end, but I'm gonna share a certain insight. The objective realm is all about movement. You exist more as a body on this earth if you move. Now, there is this thing at the same time where your subjective realms, you become aware of it physically. Okay, guys, I'll say it like this. Your attention is how you're piloting meaning. Right now, where my attention is where the meaning of my moment is. A second ago, I was drinking coffee, my attention was there. So now is a time where we are recognizing our tribe is transcendental. And it is transcendental even in an ageist way, you can say. Even in the sense that there's various hierarchies and classifications going on in society. So in some sense, we have to care for the illusion, because the illusion is the gate to the truth. Because if nothing is there, there is no search. That means the heart beats even if you stop thinking about your heart. It beats. Reality happens. It goes forth into the unknown. In the tech sector, they say the best way to predict the future is to build it. And that means that the human being can do something. The human being can conduct an activity that is more superior than whatever their belief or their inner realms is. Most people feel they from the inner realms, like there is this yogic idea the guy would meditate and the energy of his body would get so heated up that he would literally dissolve out of existence. He would go into this enlightened self-immolation, not a cultural one. And so it would be this situation where it's the rebellion of consciousness in the void while it's here. There is a strength that finds you when you actually find the real world, I find. That real world is an unknown state of mind. So right now we think knowledge is normal. Okay, guys, sorry, I gotta end the episode actually. I realized I wasn't aware of the time. But, anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. Pretty much the whole intention of this episode was that efficient vision is something to pursue in your life, and really when nobody else has your eyes, you're the only one who can update them. This updating is a sincere engagement with what is really there in the moment, and what isn't really there in the moment can be much simpler than all the complexity one has fathomed so far. That means truth has an ability to have a simple view or a complex view. So there's a self in a world, and there's a simple view of the self, and there's a complex view of the self, and there's a simple view of the world, and there's a complex view of the world, and there's a sort of kind of relationship that you can draw lines between these. And so eventually, after some point, you realize that the value of your mind is that it has to define itself, and that's kind of how you pilot your attention. You realize that free will is an opportunity in space-time continuum, where for a certain amount of time you have a sort of elemental privilege to express. So we must not even fear our inner realms, we must become comfortable sharing them. Why? Because that's where the mind of civilization is going. The inner realms that have laid dormant, these imagined inner lives we all live that we don't, in some sense, it never penetrates into the sincerity of the culture and the civilization. All of this must change. That we begin searching for the advanced human being. And the advanced human being advances through a recognition that regardless of the picture of the world, regardless of how alive that picture is, if whether it's a picture or it's a film, whether it's a god or it's like a man-made image, in some sense, there is some movement going on regardless. And it's we as human beings, as 8 billion creatures on a rock, that's our efficiency, really. To, in some sense, recognize that beyond all archetypes, the unknown has the beauty of where novelty emerges from. So anyways, guys, thanks for tuning in. I hope this talk was good, was helpful. Much blessings and namaste.